All right. So we're going to be talking about the first. Can't zoom in anymore. Okay, we're going to be talking about the first major civilizations in the Americas. Yesterday we talked about how they came down, right? What ocean did they cross? What body of water?
Bering Sea.
Bering Sea. They crossed the Bering Sea, and that was because
Ice and falling food.
yeah, the ice had allowed a land bridge to form, and they were following their food. They were following the mammoths, and so years and years went by. Thousands of years went by, and eventually groups of people formed and located and settled down in central Mexico. And these were the great civilizations of the North American continent. Okay. The first one up is the Olmec. So they were around 900 BCE, and they were located, Texas is up here. They were located around this region of Mexico, right here. Just a kind of a little offset. Why do you think they developed and settled there?
Water.
What shows you water on that map?
The blue.
Yeah, well, all these little rivers in this area, is there fertile ground near rivers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they settled here and they can start farming in this area, and they ended up developing one of the key aspects of the Olmec. This is early on, 900 BCE.
Before Christ.
They were able to farm and produce enough food for thousands of people, which is, how many of y'all have started a garden at home? Or your parents have gardened at home? Are y'all good at gardening, or do you not have a green thumb?
What?
A green thumb is something that people say that people have if they're really good at gardening, and that their plants always produce what they know, right?
Fresh.
Like you may get a handful of vegetables or whatever you're growing, and it's like, this is hard to get it to grow. Okay? But they produced enough food here for a large group of people. Next up were the Mayan. Okay? And they settled here in the Yucatan. How many of y'all have ever been to the Yucatan? Cozumel, Cancun.
I've been to both.
Yeah, that's the Yucatan.
Oh, I
Okay.
Oh,
Yucatan's right over here. In fact, a couple years ago when I went to the Yucatan, just I think during the same time or maybe a week apart, Miss Duran was in Tulum in the Yucatan. So we were like 45 minutes apart.
Who?
She was a previous teacher here. Yeah. And so that was kind of cool, right? And then lastly was the Aztecs. Now their reign was cut short because of the arrival of the Spanish that came in at around 1500. But they were located more central here. Do you think that it would have been easier to build a civilization in these two places than it would have been here?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
mountains.
Water.
We grow crops.
Mountains. Is it easy to grow crops on sloped land?
Or sloped rock.
No. What direction do the plants like to grow? Toward what?
The sun.
Toward the sun, right?
What if the
They-
mountain is?
Well, they've done different experiments where they have shifted the sunlight for a plant that's growing in the dark, and they'll like move the light source from here to here, and they can visibly see the plant following the sunlight, right? So if you're on a slope and you're trying to plant on that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because you don't have that flat. The root structure is not going to be as developed as it would be if it was a flat. Make it easy for the plants, all right? So let's take a look at the Olmec first. Because they were so early on, we don't know too much about them. We definitely know more about the Mayan and the Aztecs than we do about the Olmec. We do know that the Olmec did end up influencing the Mayan and the Aztecs, because we can see some similarities between how the Olmec built things with how the Mayan and the Aztecs did. In fact, the Olmecs start building stone mounds, like kind of mini pyramids. And you'll see later on, the Mayan definitely improved on that, and so did the Aztecs. Okay, and then we're really not sure kind of why they disappeared. We don't know. It could have been war, it could have been famine, a drought, disease.
Secret society?
No, not secret society. Right?
Aliens.
No, not aliens. No.
We're trying to make
All,
history more.
there's this, the simplest explanation is probably the answer, right? That there's this Occam's razor or something like that. Simplest explanation is the answer. So you start throwing up aliens, and no, that's not simple. It's not likely.
Why is it so steep?
Oh yeah, it is steep. All right, so this is the Mayan civilization. This is one of their most famous pyramids, Chichén Itzá. It's in the Yucatan. And this is actually a photo that I took when I went there. Okay, but we'll talk about Chichén Itzá in a minute. So sources of water. One of the things that makes the Yucatan really kind of geologically special is they have these things called cenotes. And cenotes are like sinkholes, but there's a fresh water source underneath. So this is a cenote that they've built stairs that you can, in the next picture, well, this picture right here, I was at the top of the cenote. And then there's a bunch of stairs that they built to go down, and you can go swimming in it. But it's fresh water. Now, you can, I mean, I wouldn't with all those people swimming in it. But in another, I went scuba diving in one of the cenotes. And you go into this underwater cave. And I was actually looking for video of that I took on that scuba diving. I couldn't find it on the cloud, so it must be somewhere else.
Did you jump off of it?
Well, they do have a platform over here that I did jump off of.
But you can't jump from the top.
No. Yeah, I mean, when you jump more than 50 feet, it's like hitting concrete, right? You gotta have something to break the water, otherwise,
Better
You're gonna
use
break
your
your legs.
toes.
huh? Well, you don't wanna break your toes, you know. Toe bones are not very strong on that. But
Oh, yeah,
when I
yes,
went
sir.
when I went scuba diving in the cenote, there's this really interesting aspect that happens. So you get far enough down, and the water goes from fresh water to salt water, because the salt water coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, like some of that water is flowing underneath the land, kind of in the water table. And so when you're diving, it's really clear when you're in fresh water, and then as you start to mix with the salt water, have any of y'all seen the movie Stargate? Or the TV show Stargate? Okay, it's like this, it becomes like this wavy portal type deal. Like you cannot see. All you see is these waves. It's really pretty cool. But we went scuba diving in this, I was going alone with a guide. But it was so dark in these caves, you couldn't see. In fact, they tell you, so we had flashlights, but even the flashlights couldn't go so far. And they tell you to stick with your guide, because if you don't, not all the underwater caves are explored. And if you get lost, you could die, because you're gonna run out of air diving, and everything's underwater. They even had some warning signs posted up about unexplored parts of the cave. And the warning sign was a skull and crossbones with the Spanish word for danger.
Did you
Under
go
it.
in
No, didn't. But my guide told us that within the past year of when I had gone, there had been a
Council.
group that had gone, and one of the people got lost from the group, They found him 3 days later. He's dead. He got stuck, he got wedged, because we're underwater, we're in a cave too. And he got wedged between some rocks, because he was trying to swim through an area. He got wedged and drowned. So, you know, but in some cenotes, when they first started uncovering them, they did find bones at the bottom of the cenote, both animal bones and human bones.
Did you get one?
So it may be like a sacrifice kind of thing.
Well, that may have occurred, that there was some type of sacrifice there. It's also that archaeologists think that it could have just been innocently, people go there for fresh water. It's a water source, fresh
And
water
then they
source.
fall in
And they fall in and either can't swim, or if they're there by themselves, they get tired of treading water and they can't get out, and then they drown. Okay. And that's what they think happened with the animals, why there were animal bones down there.
Was it cold?
It was pretty chilly. I mean, I had a wetsuit on for when I went scuba diving in the cenote, and that keeps you warm. But these cenotes served both as a freshwater source and a religious significance to the Mayan people.
Why did they want to drink out of it? They put in.
Well, it was still fresh water source. And the cenotes are deep enough that, a dead animal in it's not going to necessarily poison the water. And the water is moving. It's not like just a lake that doesn't have any other movement to it, because you have that salt water underneath that's moving. Okay, this is another. So another thing that I did when I went to the Yucatan was I ziplined across this lake that was there. I did not realize until afterwards, because at the end of the zip line they show a sign that shows, "Watch out, crocodiles are in this lake."
That hurts.
You get bit?
Is that you?
Yeah.
a crocodile.
I didn't see any crocodiles, but they do have the sign at the very bottom of the zip line. Now, it's a metal cable, and they give me, in order to stop, they gave me the stick that had in the wood it was notched out. And you just hold that stick and put it on the metal cable as you're going down, and it slows you down, it creates enough friction. But at the end of it, you can smell burning wood, because that friction on the stick ends up, if you looked at the inside of the notch, it was all black from it charring, right? But after this, we had to canoe across that lake with crocodiles in it. And the tour group I was with, I was the only English speaker. The other couple was Italian, and so we didn't really have a common language. That made for an interesting paddle. How many of y'all have been in a canoe before? Does it help to be able to communicate about who's going to paddle on what side and shifting weight?
Oh wait, I haven't been.
Yeah, well, in a canoe it does, so that was interesting, right? But these lakes also served as a source of fresh water in the Yucatan. Okay. This is Chichen Itza. Okay. It was discovered in the late, I think in the 80s, 1980s, and created as a world, or set as a World Heritage Site in 1998, so relatively recent. Before it was set as a World Heritage Site, you could actually climb up to it, climb up those steps to the very top. But they didn't like people doing it, and because as people walk up the steps, they kind of add to the erosion of the steps. And even though these are stone steps, after so many people walking up and down, they can become brittle. And so as a World Heritage Site, they have stopped doing that. Yes?
Why are they so steep?
That's the way that they built them. I'm not entirely sure as to why, but they are still discovering others up here. In fact, on the next slide was that one I could climb up to, and that was also pretty steep. This one was newly discovered, and as they were exploring around the area of that Chichen Itza pyramid, they're cutting back the rainforest that's there, and that's when they found this pyramid too. So who knows if there are other pyramids in the Yucatan? There probably are, but the rainforest over the years has just kind of engulfed them and kept them secret. So it's kind of crazy to think that we're still discovering stuff in the Yucatan. Right. And so I took a little selfie there. But our guide did tell us on this one that this pyramid, within the next 5 years of when I was there, they think that it's going to become a World Heritage Site. So this was 2017. So they're expecting it for you to not be able to climb that top one either. And you can see they're still doing some excavation around the pyramid sites, and they're discovering more and more about it. But these pyramids served as a religious, mainly as a religion. So the Mayan people were a theocracy. What does that mean? What's a theocracy?
Is that a form of government?
It is a form of government. Who rules in a theocracy?
King?
Hmm?
King?
I didn't catch that.
The king?
Not necessarily the king,
The priest?
the priests.
Oh wait, actually?
Yeah, the religious. It's a theocracy is controlled by religious people. So we often think about the Mayan or the Aztecs as being the ones with human sacrifices, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Mayans also did human sacrifices. And in fact, this pyramid, they look at the Chichen Itza as a religious site for the Mayans. And as they're discovering, excavating and discovering new artifacts, that's being used as more evidence to support those ideas.
But they kill him and they're in the storm in them?
Well, not necessarily kill. In fact, that's what this picture's about. I mean, not just like, they wouldn't necessarily throw them in it. And the Mayans looked at death in a very different way, at least for these games. So this was a court, not like a judge court, but like a sporting event court, in which two teams, one from neighboring tribes, each neighboring tribe, would come together and they would compete. The winner of this game would be sacrificed.
So you wanna lose?
Well,
They probably
So
thought
it's
of
a
it as a
theocracy.
great honor to
Well-
be sacrificed.
well, in this theocracy, they some of the ideas that they had was that if we don't sacrifice, some calamity will come to our civilization, and wipe out the civilization. So we have to sacrifice in order to save our families. We have to sacrifice in order to save our people.
I just thought of something.
Yeah.
If they, do you ever wonder where they got that idea from? Like,
No,
Great
I mean,
Calamity. I just thought maybe
Religion's
they
all
thought
the
it was the Great Calamity would happen because it had happened before to the Olmec.
it could
They
have.
knew that.
It would have been passed down by generation to generation, and it would have become part of their tradition. And we may think of that as something kind of a crazy idea that you have to sacrifice yourself to save people. But take, for example, the last Avengers movie.
Oop.
What did Iron Man do?
Iron Man.
Yeah,
He
so
killed
they,
himself.
yeah.
He died.
Yeah, he snapped his fingers knowing that it would kill himself for the sake of everybody
In the
around.
world.
So it was that mentality
No, in the
that,
universe.
yeah, but it was that mentality that people in this society had. So in this game, you can see a little bit that there's on this side of the wall, there's this circle with a hole through it, a stone circle with a hole.
I've seen
Right.
that before.
And it was similar to basketball, okay? They would have a 10-pound rubber ball though. Yeah, it's, I mean, heavy. And they would be using their forearms, elbows, and their knees to knock this 10-pound ball through this hole.
So no hands?
So they had to knock it up with like their elbows.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this was seen kind of it was used for religious purposes, but it was also, this game was also used to solve disputes between varying tribes or factions within the Mayan Empire. I think the next slide shows it a little closer up. Yeah. 10-pound rubber ball that you've got to throw through there.
That's a pretty small move.
Was it high?
Was it?
So
Yeah, it was pretty high. I mean,
They must have been
That's
very
about-
strong.
that's probably about a 30-foot
Wait, this-
deal. Now, it could have been that this area right here where people are standing was built up. I mean, again, this has been excavated. So I'm not sure where the field was actual. You know, this ground does not necessarily represent where the field started.
Wait,
Yes.
how did they know that it was a 10-pound rubber ball? Wouldn't that have like decayed?
So through they estimate the weight based on they know that the material was rubber, and they know about the size.
So
about
basically
how
they
big.
calculated the,
Wait,
and
but
they
how
knew
did
the
they know
density.
Hmm?
But how do they know?
Because there would have been some leftover residue from artifacts that were preserved. Not all the rubber ball. I mean, yes, rubber would have decayed, but through different artifacts they have found that there's some rubber residue here. You know, it's depending on how much it decayed. It looks like it was a ball. Well, we know how big the size of the hole was. And so we can kind of estimate by that.
Density.
This is our best guess. You know, an 8 to 10 pound rubber ball that was used. And then we know that they hit with their forearms and their legs because some of the artifacts that they have found at these sites were paddings. You know, clothing paddings that went over a forearm and their knees and legs. Okay, one of the probably one of the things that the Mayans are most well known for is their calendar. There was a movie about their calendar that came out about 8 years ago, 2012. In 2012, everybody thought the world was going to end because the Mayan calendar stopped. Like, the way you read the Mayan calendar, which I'm not sure how you read this, but the way scholars were reading it, they said, they looked at it and was like, oh, 2012, the world, you know, the Mayan calendar stops. And so there was a lot of conspiracy theories, and a lot of people thought, hey, the world is going to end in 2012.
But then we
Which-
get to 2020.
Right, but think about the logic in that. We're estimating, or those people put faith in the predictive power of a Mayan people who disappeared 1,100 years ago. If they could predict 1,100 years in the future, wouldn't you think that they would have been able to predict their death, their collapse?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right? Yes.
What if they just misspelled it, and what if it was actually 2021?
Well, then we'll find out next year, won't we?
As soon as
But I
it
still-
hits
I still
Shulbach,
wanna
a
put-
meteor hits the Earth.
I still wouldn't be putting any faith in anything that tries to predict when the world is gonna end. Okay? Now, there are some theories about what caused the Mayan Empire to collapse. These buildings and pyramids, in order to put these stones together so that they would stay, the Mayans had to create this type of mortar. And it was like a pitch. And they created this pitch that kept these stones together by cutting down trees and kind of burning the trees in a way that created this tar-like pitch. Okay. Well, you're in the rainforest. Do you require trees to provide sustenance for you in that area? Yeah. But as the religious leaders, so the theory goes that as the religious leaders of the Mayans wanted bigger and bigger pyramids to reflect on them and their status, that required more and more trees to be cut down and cleared. Eventually, the food sources that the Mayan Empire used to survive would have gone away. And people would have had to leave the empire to find food somewhere else. And later on, we'll talk about how we do think that led to the Mayan collapse, and the people from the Mayan Empire ended up making their way into further to North America, because we do see some Native American tribes, early Native American tribes, build pyramids that are similar to the Mayans.
What time is it?
Okay,
What time do we leave?
in 5 minutes. All right, guys, I just want to go over one other thing. Real quick, the Aztecs, they're the ones that are known as warriors, and hey guys, let's stop putting up real quick. Okay, they're the ones known as warriors. They're the ones that we most recognize with human sacrifices. And because of that, they did conquer nearby people. Do you think they made friends with those nearby people that they conquered?
Nope.
No. They would conquer them and not just necessarily kill them, but they would enslave them. Okay? And it ends up being one of those enslaved people that they conquered that ends up helping Hernan Cortez when the Spanish arrived in the early 1500s.
Wow, so they brought it about the end.
And so
They freed
when
themselves.
Cortez and I think it was 500 conquistadors arrived, they were able to take down the Aztec Empire because Cortez aligned himself with all of the people around the Aztecs that hated them because of how the Aztecs had treated them. So it's kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend type. Yes, John.
Also, they had guns.
Yeah, but their guns are not like the guns that we have today. Their guns were not really effective.
It was like this crappy, like.
Yeah, but it wasn't even like the muskets of the 1700s. It was more
like-
primitive than that.
It was
So-
like,
Throwing a tennis ball or something.
So I mean, it wasn't going to be very accurate. It was going to be scary, but the conquistadors killed more people with their swords than they did with their guns.
What?
Okay,
Oh,
and something else that helped them was they had armor on, and so when the Aztecs when there was fighting, and the Aztecs would throw arrows and spears, some of those would just deflect off the armor. Okay, but it's only 500 conquistadors, and there's no way that 500 conquistadors could have fought off thousands of Aztecs alone. In the late 1800s, there will be this Native American battle between U.S. Army officer General Custer, or Colonel Custer, against Native Americans. He got wiped out. And it was because of the numbers. Now, their guns in the late 1800s were a lot more advanced, and they had like a repeating rifle. Okay, but that was no match for the numbers of the Native Americans. that wiped out this, and it was a massacre. And then the last thing, quick, is the Inca. So this is a picture of Machu Picchu in, anyone know what country? Peru. Okay, it's a religious site. Some of the things that are notable from the Inca is that they grew up, or they developed in mountainous regions, but they used terraces to help them farm in those mountain regions. So they essentially excavated the mountainside and built these platforms into the mountainside so that they could farm on these lines. Pretty impressive on that. But they were ended by this guy. Another Spanish conquistador named Pizarro. And he was kind of a jerk. He captured the Inca's leader and held them hostage and said, hey, Incan people, pay us in all of your silver or we're gonna kill them. The
Yeah.
Incan people paid Pizarro in a lot of silver, and then Pizarro killed the leader anyway.
Wow.
But
Still very
Pizarro,
surprised.
especially with the roads in there, the roads helped spread the disease that Pizarro brought.